Hello, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. This is Jabra Ghanem again with more Old Testament. We're still in the book of Genesis and the story of Joseph. We're in the thick of it now with Joseph. In the previous chapter, he was sold into slavery by his brethren. Um, we are experiencing his confusion. We don't know who it is, the Midianites or the Arabs or the Ishmaelites or whoever sold him. Uh, Actually, this morning I was looking through some references, and by accident I came through an interesting Jewish interpretation of the story of Joseph, where they say, well, the brothers actually never sold him. They threw him into the pit. They were thinking and contemplating selling him, but they didn't. The Midianites or the Ishmaelites or whoever it was came by the well, picked Joseph up and took him, because in the scene there is a disjunction in the scene where they go eat and leave him in the well, and then they see the caravan coming from afar, and they say the Ishmaelites took him while they were eating. It doesn't absolve them completely, but it makes it look like they haven't sold him into slavery. Anyway, so that's where we are now. Joseph ends up, remember, his name is amazing because it means to add to take away, and it also means sorrow. So we continue to see the theme in Joseph's life, because the Lord blesses him wherever he are, but his life is also marred with sorrow, and things get taken away from him all the time, especially his shirt. I don't know what's wrong with the shirt thing, but his shirt gets taken away from him. Now, in verse 1 of chapter 39, we're still seeing this from Joseph's perspective, because in the previous chapter it says Midianites. Now we're saying the Arabs are the ones who took him down to Egypt. And then they bring him to the house of Potiphar, who is the chief courtier. He is the head, the man responsible for jails. And it also says in the Hebrew that he was a eunuch. That is very typical of the culture at the time. Eunuchs were highly trusted by kings and pharaohs, and they were usually given lots of authority. And the Lord was with him. The Lord was with Joseph. Now, I wrote a note about this on the Facebook page, about this transactional perspective that we slips into the scriptures, that if you're righteous, the Lord will prosper you, that with material prosperity, and if you're not, then you're not rewarded with material prosperity. That was definitely and still is in the culture to this day, this belief that if you're good and righteous, then the Lord is with you. When we get to the book of Job, we will discuss this in further detail. But for now, this is one slippage of that perspective into the scriptures. And when his master saw that God was with him, basically Joseph had favor in the eyes of his master, in the eyes of Potiphar, and he put him in charge of everything, all of his material property, except, as it says in verse 6, except the food that he ate. Now, this is a brilliant wordplay. I love the book of Genesis and how it uses words. Now, in English, the English reader doesn't see these things because it's translated a certain way, and it prevents you from seeing the little cultural details and the poetry. Now, on one hand, Egyptians were known, and we will see this in the story of Joseph when his brothers come visit him. Egyptians do not eat with people from outside of Egypt. They consider them unclean. They don't eat with them. So that's one interpretation, and definitely that was the case. He did not eat with Joseph, probably. He did not trust his food to him. Some suggested it's because he was worried that a Hebrew slave might poison him. That's not the case. And when we talk about the pharaohs of Egypt, I'll talk about this again. But the word food, laham in Hebrew and lahm in Arabic, It means meat, flesh, bread, and it means your flesh, either your family or your wife. So one interpretation of this, it can be that he did not trust him with his wife. The wife wasn't under Joseph. She wasn't entrusted to Joseph. Everything but the food and the wife. But the economy of words, they achieved that in, just one phrase. He trusted him with everything except the food that he ate. And in Psalms 30, there is what's called a proof text that shows that this interpretation is correct, because the word eating food is meant as having sexual relations with a person when you're eating food. And definitely in vulgar language, in most languages, in the vulgar side of languages, the meaning still there. So Joseph apparently was handsome, good looking, and Potiphar was a eunuch, and his wife, Potiphar's wife, was attracted to Joseph, and she starts wanting him to lay with her. And Joseph repeats to her, he says, everything in my house he has entrusted to me except you. So that supports the previous point I was talking about, which is, about eating food. So he says, he trusted me with everything except you, because you are his wife. But she was persistent, and he would not do it. And he would not lay with her. And one day he's in the house. Now, if I was Joseph, knowing that this is the situation, I would always have company when I go into the house. So not to blame Joseph, but I think wisdom would have necessitated that he would go in company to the house and not be alone with this person who wants him to have intercourse with her. So what she does then is, at that point, when nobody is there, she holds onto his shirt, insisting that he lays with her. But Joseph runs away, which is commendable. It's amazing. He's a person with a lot of power, and he wouldn't, for the sake of righteousness, experience it. Now, this is a lesson for our age and time, where there are so many men who abuse positions of power to commit sexual immorality and force sexual immorality on women. Joseph is a great example here, but he leaves his shirt. Here is this scene again of his shirt taken away right from him, right before he gets in trouble, right before he's thrown in a pit, right before he descends. So now notice what happens next with Potiphar's wife. The story of what happened is repeated 3 times. The first time, so we're told the story initially that, she asked him to lay with her. He refused. She took the shirt. He ran away. Then the second telling of the story, she calls in the slaves in the house, the people in the house, and she says, look how he brought a Hebrew man to our house and to play with us. Now, the word play translated English doesn't reflect the Hebrew or the Semitic feeling. Here, it means to manipulate us, to take advantage of us. So she says to play with us. He came to lay with me, and notice she says, I screamed, I called out loud, because she wants to say, I tried to send him away. I tried to defend myself. And this is what's expected of a Semitic woman, is she needs to scream and call for help and fight and resist. And then when he heard me scream, he left his shirt in my hands and he ran away. So this is her first, and he went to the market. So this is her first telling. Then Potiphar comes, and she says, the Hebrew slave. So notice, in the first instance, she says a Hebrew man. She doesn't use the word slave because she's probably appealing. She doesn't want to lose solidarity with the slaves in the house that she called in. She says a Hebrew man. But to her house, she says a Hebrew slave in a way to shame him, in the sense that your slave, the slave is trying to lay with me. And when I raised my voice and called, he left his shirt in my hands and he ran to the market. And when he heard what she said, he was angry with him. Now, the punishment for this in the Near East, ancient until modern times, is execution. Joseph would have been definitely executed. But what happens here is Potiphar takes him and he throws him in jail because Potiphar is responsible for jail and for the prisoners. And again, so Joseph is again thrown in a pit. So that theme happens again. And God was with him again. And because he's Yusuf, things get added to him, taken away, things get taken away from him, but things get added to him while he's experiencing sorrow, asaf. And he was a favorite with the prison warden, and he put everything under Joseph. Now, people think that Joseph now does not belong to the house of Potiphar, but because Potiphar was the courtier, he was in charge of prison, so he was just relocated from one house of Potiphar and from one responsibility to one that is lesser, but he is still a part of Potiphar's domain. And he did everything, and everything prospered in his hands. Now, with this, we have chapter 40. And chapter 40, notice dreams happen in couplets. There are two dreams usually, not one dream. The dreams happen in couplets. The dreams of the baker and the winer happened. Two dreams happen. So he's with them and they tell him the dreams, and Joseph basically interprets the dream. Now, dream interpretation was very common. If you go to the second or third segment, I talked about that. I talked about the people of the Near East. They believed in dreams. It was a sort of an industry. There were specialists and people you call on to interpret dreams, and there were books about dreams. But Joseph here says, they tell him that we've heard you interpret dreams, but he says, the interpretation is God's. Basically, I'm just an instrument in God's hand to interpret those dreams. And he interprets the dreams to them, and whatever he interprets actually happens. The winemaker, the person who basically gives wine to the Pharaoh, they used to call them people of pure hands because they taste the wine before it goes to Pharaoh to make sure there is no poison in it. And he ends up getting released as Joseph interpreted, and the baker ends up getting crucified as Joseph predicted. Joseph asks them to remember him in front of Pharaoh, tell him about his story. Maybe he would release him, but they forget. So this is this part today. So Joseph is in the pit. This is a cliffhanger of sorts. But it's a great story, and all the elements come together. I love the wordplay in the story of Joseph and Pharaoh's wife, and I love how Joseph lives up to his name. Things get added to him while things are taken away from him, and he experiences great sorrow. It's sort of a pattern that helps you remember the story. And I think it's always a good perspective to have in our lives, that it's not all negative. The Lord sometimes, or life sometimes, takes things away from us, but there are things that get added. We're blessed in so many ways. Just by the virtue that we breathe and our hearts beat from day to day, we are blessed. So things can get taken away, but things get added to us every day, even in the midst of sorrow. I know this to be true, and I say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you for listening.